This is Shabbos Yud Zayin, but before we get to that, I just want to finish off last daf. Last daf, we were end up talking about that Reb Shimon Bar Rebbe was saying that you could actually return a pot of hot water onto a unbanked kira, onto an oven where the coals aren't completely covered. And the question was, if you're not allowed to leave a pot of water that is hot on a unbanked kira when it comes nightfall, how come on Shabbos you're allowed to return it? So we didn't have a svara, but now I have a svara. The svara is like this. It depends why you're trying to say that it's not allowed. See, when you have a hot water on an unbanked kira, it's very possible you say, hey, you know what? I have hot water. Let me put in some tea leaves. Let me put in some other food. That will help my food either warm faster or I could cook new food. So we're afraid if you have hot water left over there before Shabbos, then you might cook new food. So why is it an unbanked kira? Because an unbanked kira has two parts. The one, you can put food into the pot. Two, you could stoke the oven. When it's banked and covered, you're not going to be able to play around with that. So at the best, you're going to do something that cooks that with less warm water. Whereas if you're returning the water to the kira, you're not doing it because you want to now cook other things. You're doing it because you want to keep the water hot. So maybe that's what Reb Shimon Bar Yehuda was talking about. Okay, that's a svara. We move on now to Yud Zayin. Now we're talking about pas, and we know there's no Eifa Achar Eifa, there's no Bishul Achar Bishul. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha B'Shem Ravasi, Zerizus Hein Hanoshin Bepas Yoser Ben Atavshil. Women are much more diligent and much more Zerizus. They pay much more attention when it's cooking bread because they don't want the bread to overcook. Ma bein pas bein tafshil. What's the difference between pas and tafshil? Tafshil darka lechel roisech. It's used to be eating it hot. In other words, the hotter the better. The better you cook food, and it absorbs water, and it softens the meat, softens the chicken, whatever you're cooking, and it softens the vegetables. That is better. Pas ein darka lechel roisach. You don't eat bread hot. You eat bread warm, but you don't eat bread hot. Hot bread, then it comes toast, and then it becomes done. Finished. Toast to finished, euphemisms for done. So that will happen to your bread if you leave it too long. Whereas if you leave stew, keep cooking, it gets better. Tamon Amrin, over there, they said, and both of them said, Pas chamo, chamosa, b'tzida. Hot bread, it follows a fever. In other words, if people eat hot bread, then you get a fever. Tzrion, tzoinin. A hornet stings you, so then you drink cold water. And akra chamin, but if you have a scorpion, then you drink hot water. And man, temechlaf sakana, someone who mixes up these remedies, it is sakana. Moida Reb Eliezer belecha panim. Reb Eliezer is moida when it comes to lechem apanim. That she'enu kuriya lechem ad sheyekrumu paneha b'tanor. Until the bottom of the bread gets crusted by the tanor, it's not considered bread. It's not kosher for lechem apanim, and that's what we consider as bread. Mashlishin sapesach latanor im chashechos. Now we're starting halacha yud aleph. One may lower a carbon pesach into a tanor on Friday night. So if, let's say, the Seder night comes out on Friday night, it comes out Shabbos, so then you're allowed to lower your carbon pesach as it gets close to nightfall. Umachzikin esaor v'midras beis hamoiked, and one may touch the fire of a pyre of the fire chamber. So in other words, if you want to have a fire in the Beis HaMikdash, you are allowed to then light a stick, and then the stick then lights another little bonfire. You could do it from the one that's in the Mizbeach. But outside the boundaries, which means outside of the Beis HaMikdash, Kedesha, Yitzas, or Beruvan, it has to make sure that most of the sticks in the fire have gotten caught on fire, sufficient to be considered a bonfire or a fire for what the purposes you want. And it says, Af min kol she'ein, that in case of charcoals, even slightly. So any part of charcoals, so as long as they caught on, that's fine, because charcoals, we know, is a slow cooker. So they cook on slowly. You're not going to do anything with it. You're going to allow it to go ahead and slow cook, and eventually they're going to heat up and they're going to do what it's supposed to be doing. Now, we learn in the Gemara, Mishal Shalin as a Pesach Tanor, you lower the Pesach if Pesach falls out on Shabbos and you need to eat Carbon Pesach later. You obviously do not want a cold or a raw Carbon Pesach. So now what are we talking about? Are we talking about cooking on Shabbos or just talking about keeping it warm? Tamba and Taninan. We learned there in the Mishnah that Chashecha Yatsu V'Tzalo as Pesachim. As soon as it became dark, he started to roast it. Because you're allowed to roast on Yom Tif. That's regular Yom Tif when it doesn't fall on Shabbos. V'yat Amar Hachin, and you're saying this, that you could lower it on Shabbos? So basically, Gemara's Havmin is saying this. Usually, the procedure is you go ahead and get it shechted and bought by the Beis HaMikdash in your group, and then you come home. And then when it comes dark, you start roasting it. By the time you get up to the fact, you need Afikaimin. By the time you get up to the fact, you need the Suda of Pesach, so then it will be roasted. Whereas, first of all, that should tell you, by the way, that Mishnah should tell you exactly how long Magid was. Clearly, they didn't just skim through Magid. They actually told the story. And maybe a little pshat, you could say, a cute little pshat is Kolar Marbim Sapas Yisrael Reizem Shubach, because otherwise you're going to have raw Carbon Pesach by the time you get to the meal. So talk a little bit more so the Carbon Pesach gets cooked. Okay, that's a cute little part. Anyway, what we see the point is they roasted it after Shabbos. So Rabbi Yezer basically says, Chavurais is Rizah saying, the Chavurais, the ones who were in charge of the groups, they were Zrizim. Zrizim is two-way. One, you're quick to do mitzvahs, but you're also very particular and conscientious. So therefore, what are we saying? The conscientious, they know the drill. They know that it's Friday. So what they're going to do is they're going to make sure they're going to Zrizim to the Beis HaMikdash, and they're going to Zrizim home, and they're going to then cook it and roast it, make sure it's completely roasted before Shabbos, and then all you're doing on Shabbos is having it keep warm. Pesach, so we learned the Pesach, Machziroi at Sholem, you can return it whole to the Tanor, V'ein at Machzirin mechutach. We cannot do it sliced. So Rabbi Shmuel B'Sher B'Zera says, why can't you do it sliced? Are you afraid you're going to cook it more? What are you worried about? It's puzzle. Once you slice it, it's puzzle. The Torah says you have to cook it, roast it whole. So you can't slice it in pieces. You can't fillet the Carbon Pesach and then roast it. You have to make sure that it's done whole. So you can't return slices that you think either have to get warm or have to cook more, whether or not it's Shabbos, to the Tanor. They're talking about whether or not it's Shabbos. And obviously on Yom Tov even, this is not going to be allowed because you can't cook it in slices. Rabbi says, and that's correct. You're not be able to eat it because it says, Al toichlo menu nut. Don't eat it like this when it's partially roasted. Let's slice on ein at yochel to roast it. And then you not be able to do that, to do it in parts. And so you cannot do it on Shabbos also, because if you can't do it on Shabbos, we don't want to start saying, oh, look, you did it on Shabbos, then you can do it on Yom Tov. And even though Shabbos, you're doing it only to warm up, but then you're going to say, oh, the next year, even if it's raw, I still can do it. So you can't do it. Oimer shehu mutter, and the consequences of your saying that it's mutter, afu einon soiles, oisai kol tzroichem v'yayim, then they're not gonna roast it all the entire day. Mutar she'at oimer lu aser, since you said it's aser, afu soiles oisai kol tzroichem v'yayim. Therefore, he will make sure it's roasted completely while it's still daytime, and they're going to make sure that they're not putting anything raw on the fire. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yossi Shil, Rabbi Lezer Yossi asked, let's say you roasted it whole and then you sliced it. What is the law regarding returning warming up? So the answer would be, is both Shabbos, both Yom Tif, you're not going to do it. Why? Because even though you just want to warm it up, the problem is you're going to do it on Yom Tif, you think you could also do it on Shabbos. And also, if you do it on Shabbos, so if you do it on Yom Tif, so then you're going to think that you could actually roast it while it's warm, even though you're just trying to warm a piece that is completely roasted. But the thing is, if you do it on Shabbos, then you're going to think, oh, if I did it on Shabbos, so then I know on Shabbos that it's fully cooked, so maybe then I could do it on Yom Tif. But then what? So then again, a circular reason, because when it's doing it on Yom Tif, you think you do it also if it's raw. Rab Zeira, Rab Yehuda b'shem Rav. Rab Zeira, Rab Yehuda says the name of Rav. Arba Medurais Kol Shehein. There were 4 types of pyres we're talking about that even slightly, that's fine. Mudros HaGefes, with a pyre of olive refuse. Mudros HaZevel, produce of fertilizer. Mudros HaChelev, if it's fats. Or Mudros Gal Inim, or of dried pits. Kol Shehein slightly is good, because what's going to happen is they're all going to catch on. Rabbi Babishem, Rabbi Chia Barashi, Rabbasan in Rashi, Chaisal Shehu Male Galinim, a basket that's full of pits, Kol Shehin, also Kol Shehin. So Rabbi Babishem, Rabbi Chia Barashi, so they ask Chaisal Shehu Male Galinim, a basket that's full of pits, Im Mechu Nasois. If the pits are packed together, Meruban, then most of them are going to catch. Im Mufuzarois, but if they're spread apart, Baraiv Kol Peirois Veroi, then it has to go majority to each and every single Peiroi. So Mapligi. So what exactly is the argument over here? Kan bivrios. One says when it's hardy, that it doesn't make a difference if it's spread out because then it's going to catch anyway. So even a little bit it's going to catch. The kan bisashrais. Another says when it's weak, when they're wet, when they're still moist. Because then the situation is then you have to wait for each and every single one of them to be rubai because then catch on. Because otherwise you're afraid that it's going to catch on a little bit and go out, and then on Shabbos you might come to light it. So that makes a difference. So when it's dry and easy to fire, then whether it's packed or whether it's spread out, no problem. Because even a little bit, it's going to eventually come into coals, and eventually it's going to burn slowly. Whereas it's moist, you're afraid it's going to go out, and you're going to come to light on Shabbos. Let's finish off the perek. Rabbi Yosi b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah. He says the name Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Chanina Mote ba b'shem Rav. Charoyos milmata ve'etzeh milmaila. So palm branches are on the bottom of the water range above them. Kevon she'ala ha'or bin tayim mutar. So once the fire is risen between the two layers, then it's permissible. Then the bonfire is catching on. Rab Chelboi b'shem Rav Huna. Rab Chelboi says the name Rav Huna. Kaira Beruva, so a beam that catches on mostly Beraiv Hey Kefa, most of the circumference. So then the question is like this: most of a single part of the circumference, or most of the entire beam circumference? Let's say 20-foot beam. Are you talking about one part of the beam, a full circumference, and eventually it's going to go burn the rest? Or are you talking about the entire beam, most of the circumference? So Ma Beraiv HaKefa, what does it mean most of the circumference? B'makam echad in one place. I Beraiv HaKefa Kula, or is it talking about the entire? So Ashkach Tani, so a Bryce was found at Shetifosel Malasais Malacha. It's sufficient enough for it to be burning that you no longer do work within the Shabbos. Once you see it's burning enough, I'm not going to use it as a structure beam. I'm not going to use it to support anything. I'm not going to use it for work on Shabbos, even work during the week. Then there's no problem to use it on Shabbos. So again, as long as it's burning enough that now the wood is ruined enough that it can't be used for other things, that means it's enough that it's burning. So Kani Masnisa. So then the Mishnah is trying to corroborate this. Even in a case where charcoal's even slightly, because charcoal's even slightly, they're no longer in use, and also charcoal's burned slowly. So since charcoal's burned slowly, then you could let it go ahead and you could let them burn on Shabbos. You're not going to be afraid you're going to light it because everyone knows that charcoals go slowly and eventually they do catch on and they burn slowly. Okay, so that's why charcoals, all you need is a slight amount. You're not worried about any malacha on Shabbos. Hadrach halacha Yitziyah Shabbos Hadrach. We will turn to you. Yitziyah Shabbos. We will turn to you. Now we start Perek Beis Zokt Halacha Aleph in Perek Beis. But with what may one may kindle on Shabbos, what may not kindle on Shabbos. We're going to start the Mishnah. Then we're going to finish off in Mitzvah tomorrow. Ein madlikin loy belechesh. One may not kindle with lechesh. We'll find out what that is. Loy bechaysav loy bechalach. Not with uncarded wax. Not with kalach. We'll find out what that is. Loy b'fsilas ha'idon. V'loy b'fsilas ha'midbar. Not with willow blast or with desert fibers. V'loy b'roika shel pnei amayim. Or nor with simos. V'loy b'zefes. V'loy b'shava. No with pitch. Not with wax. V'loy b'shem and kick. And now a kick roll. We're going to find out what it is. And we're also going to find out what the rest of the Mishnah says next time. Tune in, same time, same channel.